What's up, everybody? We are back here for the first episode of season 4, and we have our special guest, Julian Farhoud, here, who is an entrepreneur of many businesses. I was trying to figure out what one I was going to select, but we're going to get into it. He's in the cannabis space as well as many other industries. We met through our time in the food service industry. Both of us definitely left there because we wanted to go to greener pastures and bigger and better opportunities. So excited to have you here. Thanks so much, Julian, for hopping on.
Absolutely.
Well, we're excited to get him here because, really season 4 is about bringing all of you value, as it is every season, but really because of where we're at in the economy, what's happening in our world as a whole, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. We want to share with you guys individuals that are not only doing well in their career overall, but are doing well right now and are focused on where they're going in the future, because we want to give you guys a roadmap how to create success for your business, for your life, even in these challenging times. They say the average millionaire is created in a down economy. So we want to be able to give you guys the tactical advice as well as the mindset on how to approach what's going on in our world. And so hopefully this season we can continue to bring on entrepreneurs that bring you guys that value. But with that, let's get into Julian's story. So Julian, let's just quickly dive in, share a little bit about your background, where you came from. Have you always grew up here in the Valley? Just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, born in Modesto, was pretty much raised in Houston, small town, knew everybody from kindergarten to high school. Pretty much throughout here all my life. Went to Sacramento for a short period of time, actually. Went to Wild Tech. Graduated from Wild Tech, started working on, I was a technician for Hyundai, Lexus, and Toyota for a period of time. And other than that, moved back. Before that, I was actually on Lander at Jack in a Box and found out I was, having my first child, which was a good turning point for me. Definitely wouldn't be here right now and where I'm at without, that experience. It really took me to that next level, so I'm very thankful for that. But after Sacramento, moved back, was working on cars for quite some time. In that process, I something just sparked, and really started thinking about starting a business. I was about 20 at the time. And decided to take a family recipe, salsa, that my mother, originally my Tia Fina out of Austin, Texas, used to make it. We used to go back there, a few times a year. And my mother ended up, really bringing it to the table for every meal and decided, hey, you know what, I'm going to jar this up. And from that point, pretty much started getting into the entrepreneur mindset, the thought process, and figuring out, different obstacles that we come across. As the food definitely brings out a lot of interesting things. But it was a good starting point. It's a challenging industry. It's a very for me, I was selling salsa. I started off in the in the flea markets, which was a great place to test salsa. Obviously, because 90% of people, made their own salsa that were going there, right? So if you're like, for me, I was like, okay, well, if I'm able to sell it to, people that, honestly, the culture is there, right? Like, and we did pretty well at the flea market, Crow's Landing Flea Market, and we did the one off of 9th Street a handful of times. But honestly, it was wake up at 4 a.m. Stood in line with all the other little vendors that go there and popped up our booth and started selling the salsa. And we did pretty well there. So I said, okay, well, if I can sell it to the Hispanic community, and trust me, it was an interesting experience because a lot of times they would come up and speak Spanish, thinking, I obviously knew Spanish. I'm selling salsa, right? Yeah. I know enough to get by, but yeah, it was interesting. So they're like, hey, hold on, you're selling salsa, you don't know Spanish, and you're here at the flea market. But so that was a great experience. Really got me out of my bubble at a very early time. And then, we ended up taking it to farmers markets. Farmers markets was pretty interesting because obviously the requirements are a little bit different. So it taught me that next phase of things. Did a handful of farmers markets, up and down the state. And then from there, I ended up taking it to mom and pop grocery stores, cost less, the O'Brien's, Village Fresh, AG markets, the smaller chain markets. And then after about a year, I got a meeting with the buyer at Save Mart, and they were launching their local program. Yep. Yeah, and got some time with him, got the opportunity, and we launched in, I think to start was 32 Save Marts. I was DSD, so it was really hard to try to knock out a lot of those Save Marts because to scale that was pretty difficult, but it was great experience, and that's ultimately what also got me to the thought process in the cannabis space as well, because I understood the importance of distribution, the importance of being able to get the product in multiple markets at the same time, right? So that taught me that aspect of things in doing DSD and me personally getting in the van and servicing every account. I mean, you're hitting 12 max, So anyways, that taught me a lot. We got into Safeway. Safeway, we did local Safeways. And then from there, I wanted to take what I learned from the salsa and try to get into another industry that I could, scale a little bit quicker, and kind of get a little bit more something that had a little bit more revenue, attached to it. I'm not going to say more profits and so on and so forth, but something that was just a little bit more risky. And that's when we started looking at cannabis, and we ended up getting into the cannabis space with a distribution license. And that's currently kind of where we're at. We got a portfolio of brands that we've been taking to market that we've started. Today actually is our 3-year mark in the cannabis space. So
that's amazing. Well, congratulations.
Yeah. So it's been interesting, but being able to take what we learned from the time of the salsa, and I tried selling the salsa to many distributors. It was very difficult. So then I started looking at that and ended up going to a co-pack. I didn't even know what a co-packer was, So Save Mart was like, hey, you got to kind of get out of the commercial kitchen side of things, and we want to see if you can, get service more accounts. I was only able to make so much, right? So then we went into the co-packing. We went into an agreement with the co-packer and went from there. But all that information really projected me into the cannabis space, the white labeling, all that good stuff. So, we actually provide some of those services in cannabis right now for storefronts. So, I seen the importance there.
I love what you said. I mean, there's a lot that you said there, but one, the lessons you learn in scaling your business, especially in food. I think people think that it's such an easy business to get into because I already make food, so let me just sell it. And that's how it starts. And then you go into the next leg of regulation, whether it be local or county, whatever. You have to learn new sets of laws, labeling, expiration dates, all these little legal things. And then you go to the next level, and now you start dealing with the FDA. And food is a challenging space, but it really does equip you with a lot of skills that can go into other industries. And I love what you're saying right now, because there are a lot of people out there that when they're looking at an industry, they just look at profitability and they don't look at their skill sets that they have acquired. And often you might move industries, but the skill sets transition. 100%. And I think a lot of people fail to take inventory on their skill sets. So that's awesome that you acknowledge, okay, I've got this set of skills. I can transition this into this industry, which has maybe potentially a little bit more lucrative or a little bit more cash flow. Product doesn't expire as quickly,
right?
Which is the biggest part of food, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And you were able to take those skills and transition in the next one and have that quick success versus going to an industry that you have no tools to be able to apply to. And so I love that you share that, because I think that's a lot of people is they're just looking for profits instead of looking, okay, what skills do I have and what can I apply that to then create the profit.
Right, 100%. And just going off that, capturing your skill, understanding how to enhance your skill as you go along. but also relationships, right? Like I remember, early on starting the distribution, I reached out to a lot of those distributors that I was trying to get my food product into, and just split their brain, and what's happening. I'm not going to say necessarily correlates hand in hand, but what happens in other industries, you could take pieces out of each one of them, right? And so we looked at the wine, we looked at the general alcohol distribution models and things like that, the food, and kind of took in little pieces here and there, put them into the distribution in cannabis. But ultimately, our goal was to obviously come out with the brands, because we seen in the last 3 years, I've looked at where's the value, right? And every license type has taken a hit in cannabis over the last 5 years since legalization, and that's the shakeout, right? And that's currently what's happening right now. But the whole time, I'm as we're starting off as a distributor, which is lower barrier of entry compared to some of the other license types. But I said, okay, well, let's get in with a license that has a little lower barrier of entry, and figure out where the value is at before we go and spend a gang of money, right? So we raised some capital. Got into the distribution model, looked at all the product types. I was distributing third-party brands, and then pivoting, us based off of the performance, right? So, and that allowed us not to put up so much capital until we figured out where our lane was, so.
And I think it's important that you're acknowledging prior to getting started, you did this research and you looked at what avenue would give you the best data feedback. And you were able, and we've obviously had conversations before about this, of seeing what products are working well, what brands are doing well, what brands aren't doing well, and being able to use that information to then make decisions on what brands you were going to launch. And I think so many people, once again, just want to jump into things and they fail that preparation phase. But if you prepare correctly, the execution becomes so much easier. And you also probably acknowledged potential issues that you're going to have jumping into this brand or doing this, this particular product. And that was just from gaining all that experience through being in distribution.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's one of the areas, for us, competing with, some pretty deep pockets and so on and so forth, but being able to utilize the relationships in the space, having a great team, a lot of these things are factors of being able to stay in the business, good retail partners that you can go to. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's analytics you can buy within the space, but you're paying, upwards of, 40, 50, 60K, so, and that's great. That those analytics, could be, I don't believe are fully captured just yet, just because of the immaturity of the industry. I much rather go into the trenches and get that information and focus on those resources. But, we look for products that, can, push, instead of trying to push into the industry, we want a product that pulls us, so whether that's, price point, whether that's a flavor profile, whether that's, genetic or whatever that looks like, we're really focusing in on those things. So.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Rather than pushing into the market, you want to be pulled in the market. And that's an incredible way of thinking about it. And, it's something familiar that I heard from Andy Frisella many years ago, which is where the seed was planted for me getting out of food, which was, obviously I did healthy food. Mm-hmm. And it was, you don't want to sell products that people need. You want to sell products people want. Correct. And if people want it, they're going to pull you into the market all day long. Yeah. Nobody's not buying a Snickers.
Yeah, 100%.
They want a Snickers all day long. Yeah. They know they shouldn't be eating it. They don't need it, but they want it. Yeah. And that's the big difference between, and people always ask, oh, you got to be killing it in health. I'm like, we're doing all right, but you got to think it's still health. Like most people don't want to do health. Like they need it, but they don't want it. Yeah. And so it's really interesting when you're looking at that, because I think a lot of people don't, they look at the need in the market, but is the want in the market. And I think that's a major factor in choosing the product or the brand that you're going to launch. Yeah.
Well, and there's other variables and aspects too that we look at when we go and assess a product. You definitely want to, a lot of, first thing the team or people ask, well, where are you going to price it at? And for me, it's more or less like, well, whatever the market decides. It's, it's really not, I price a product where the market decides it needs to be, and that can be, looking at certain things, going into the market, and try to pre-sell products, and then it's up to the entrepreneur to figure out the cost to make it work ultimately, right? To make the margin work. So, if the market decides that the product should be roughly around $12, well, it's up to that entrepreneur to make his margin, right? And that's where the entrepreneurship, I believe, comes from. Of the creative side, like you got to get creative. You got to dig deep to figure out how to make this work. I mean, and if you're not willing to do that, you probably shouldn't be doing it anyways, right? In the first place. So that's where I love taking that approach because it's challenging. It's a little bit more of a challenging, obviously you can go out and assess the competitors and base your price off that, no doubt. But, I like to also go to the consumers, the retailers, and look at the competitors and price it at a price point, and then it's up to us to figure out where that cost needs to be, right? Yeah. So a lot of times it's working backwards, but we seem to find it, working for us. So that's how we kind of been working our model, but it's challenging, and that's, I guess, what I like,
Yeah,
so.
and I think what you're saying about the pricing is really important because I think a lot of people they price based upon what they think.
Correct.
And, or maybe
or what they want, right?
What they want, yeah. And it's like, is there a product market fit for that?
Yeah.
And it's so important because sometimes people price based upon their own personal emotion and what
Correct.
they feel they need.
Yeah.
But is that even something that's valuable to the audience? Like we talk to clients about this when we're creating their offer, their promotional package. And I'm like, well, why did you give out 15%? Well, that's what I can afford.
Yeah.
I go, okay, yeah, but like, does anybody care about 15%?
Yeah.
Most people don't even wake up for 15%, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, discount. And so it's like you have to make sure you price everything to a point that actually the market wants and then figure out how it makes sense on the back end.
Correct.
And that might mean that you need to do a little less elaborate things in your business. Maybe you got to start out a little bit slower. Yeah. So many people want to be fancy with how they're doing it. They're like, oh, I'm pricing this because I want a videographer. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it's like, well, but maybe that's not where you're at yet. And you need to figure out the volume game and do more volume before you can get to those fancier things. And I always like this statement. It's fancy fails, simple scales. And you got to start out simple. You got to keep it simple. You got to stay lean and mean, like you were mentioning earlier, to be able to grow and scale your business. And then you got to bring in the fancier things as you can continue to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the first 3 years of any business is the hardest, right? So that's where I definitely feel like, it's fail fast, make the pivots, get up, fail again, and you have to hit those pivot points within the business as an entrepreneur. The markets change, especially in the time we're in right now, as you were saying at the very beginning there, and it's definitely up to the entrepreneur to really dive into keeping ahead of these things. It's challenging, but hitting those pivot points are very important, to continue the progression.
Exactly. I think this is a great way to segue into what I was mentioning earlier, which is what's happening right now. And I think you were just mentioning it, which is like keeping your head up. And I think so many people in this challenging time, especially as entrepreneurs, we were talking about before the podcast about the stress of running a business. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be a stressful time for a lot of people. It can be a very scary time. Yeah. But the one thing you can't do is put your head down because I hate that term, like put your head down and just work. It's like, but dude, you got to keep your head up because you're about to run into a damn wall. And that wall for some people is coming really, really quick.
Correct.
And so you need to keep your head up. You need to keep your eyes open and be willing to pivot, to be willing to adjust your model in these challenging times because this is where the shifts in the market happen. But if you're unwilling to pivot, you're gone. And we saw that happen, obviously, in the last 2 years with COVID. Some businesses are just gone. A lot of people just threw their hands up and were like, I'm exhausted. Yeah. Especially in the restaurant space. I've done this for too long. I'm out. Yep. Because I just want it gone.
Yep. No, I mean, the next, 8, 12, 24 months is going to define a lot of individuals. It's going to challenge a lot of markets. But it's going to also be a great time for opportunity, I mean, for me, when I seen Robinhood accounts skyrocketing, I closed my TD Ameritrade account. So when I see these types of things, in the markets, I tend to, I believe, like they say, when people are greedy, be fearful, and so on and so forth. So staying true to those things is great. It's a great model to kind of base the business off of, or you as an individual, because it will define you these next 24 months, 12 months, and for us in cannabis, honestly, when I've not personally, I know a few people that made a tremendous amount of money in 2008, and I really set the business up, structured it, our products to really flourish, not to say in a downtime only, but one thing that, like, especially when it comes to cannabis, it's a medicine as well, right? So, like, it's not all about the profits and money and things like that. We really want to try to base our products off of a time where it's going to get economically hard for individuals, and have that lower barrier of entry for the products. Taxation's high in cannabis, a lot of the logistics are extremely high in cannabis. So we're trying to create cost-effective products for the market, on our packaging, it's priced for the people, and we're preparing for these times to still get consumers the products, and at the same time battle the black market, right? So that's an area that's a challenge as well, but basing the products off of these things, and again, it goes back to keeping your head up and realizing, hey, this is coming, or this may happen, or it's better to predict and prepare, and instead of just keeping your head down, like you're saying.
What you just said, predict and prepare, man, that's so good, because I think a lot of people are just reacting. Yeah. And they're very reactive emotionally because of what's on the media, what they hear from their friend, but it is about taking inventory of your own business and going, what might be coming ahead? How can we prepare for that? Having those, I hate saying, having a plan A, B, and C, but like sometimes you do need a plan A, B, and C. Yeah. And people are like, oh, I only have one plan. And it's like, that's kind of ignorant, because if you're really running a business, you do need to have variable, plans. If this doesn't work, then we got to do this. And you got to be willing to move quickly on those plans, but it comes with being able to see that ahead of time. Right. And I think a lot of people fail to have that self-awareness of their business or their industry. Right. And I always say that you need to become an industry expert. You need to be a student of the industry. Yeah. You need to be, you were mentioning it, just this article, that article, like you're consuming information about the industry, and you want to keep your finger on the pulse.
Absolutely. And that's being aware of industries outside of what you're in, right? Yeah. So, where we see the market going, it may not be the same thing as 2008 necessarily. It may happen in certain areas, but it's going to have a trickle effect. I mean, it's going to have a trickle effect across the world, let alone individual industries. So, taking a look at what's going on in the food distribution and product types, what's evolving there, or the troubles that the supply chain's having there. The liquor, wine, whatever it may be, you got to stay aware of the industries that it may align with yours, and I think that allows you to project a little bit further out. Really thinking right now that the mindset really needs to shift to long-term thinking, and making, like you said, making the decisions on the fly works in a good market, right? Yes. In a good economy, and a lot of people can make a lot of money in a good economy, but it's going to be and this is where it goes back to, it's just going to define the individuals over these next this next year or two. So and that'll be interesting to see.
I don't wish failure upon anybody, but I 100% agree. There's unfortunately going to be some hurt in the entrepreneurship market. There already is. E-com is taken a massive dip. I mean, I think I saw in the last year, it's like Shopify is down 72%. I mean, my holdings in Shopify are basically trash. and it was this, kind of unicorn stock for a while. But the amount of business that's happening on there, I think last month they reported that it was like 45% of their users hadn't logged in the last 90 days. Mm-hmm. So if you're not even logging into your Shopify store to see what's happening, that means you're not selling at all. Yeah. And that's a massive problem. And so there are markets that are being hit really, really challenging. And we thought, COVID sped everything up. but we quickly just reverted back in many ways. DoorDash, Postmates, all these companies are really hurting. But it's the cost of doing business for them. They have to increase their prices, much like restaurants.
Yeah.
You can't expect it to not happen, but it's like, how do we adjust? How do we find those opportunities? Even in the challenging times, the real winners will win because they're willing to persevere, but they're looking long-term. They're not short-term emotion about what's happening. They're long-term focused on where they're going. And I think that's really important in times like this.
And that's the key thing. Don't let the emotions get to you too quickly. Keep that longer outlook going as much as possible, because emotions, whether it's you're talking the market, stock market, or just general business, it blurs your vision pretty heavily. So always having that forward thinking outlook. But you made a good point there with again, crossing the industries that cross, Shopify is down. A lot of these delivery services are down. I mean, you can imagine what delivery services in cannabis look like, right? And cannabis is, kind of one of those consumables that, isn't, for a lot of people, it is, an upfront thought for them, but, there's other commodities that are being consumed. And when those are taking a hit, cannabis really, gets put on that back burner, and it's challenging. But again, just having those pivot points and understanding where you can drive customers to education is huge in cannabis right now. And that's where, for us, it's like we're not necessarily trying to pull back from a lot of our operations, so to speak, but we are trying to enhance the education aspect of things, right? Like, we're trying to go into stores, educate the consumers that are walking into the stores. A lot of people are going to the black market still right now. A lot of people are shifting away from buying cannabis in general. But for the people that are continuing to walk through those stores, we're wanting to give those people the opportunity right now and capture them. Because they are supporting the industry, so it's very important to give back to those consumers that are continuing to walk through the door. Give them the education, especially with one of our products, High Power. That's 1,000 milligrams tincture, water soluble syrup, and that takes a huge amount of education and working through all the different ways of consuming it. So we're doubling down on that, doubling down on the educational things and trying to get the word out a little bit more for the people that want to, support it and support the industry.
100%. I think, what I like that you've mentioned this a few different times, and I think you've been alluding to this the whole time, which is you focus on the people. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of times when challenging times get, and this is a quote I always like, is never make a long-term decision based upon short-term emotion. And you are locked in on focusing on delivering value. How can I bring more value to the community, to the customers? And in return, that will, unintentionally, I guess, bring you value back, right? But you do have to focus on how can we bring value to the community. I think in challenging times like this, people start to pull back and figure out how can I bring value to me?
Yeah.
Because they are very, and rightfully so, they're scared.
Absolutely.
They're emotional. They've got family. They've got their own bills to pay, right? How can you worry about everybody else if you're not taking care of yourself?
Correct.
But I think the biggest thing that you can do, whether it be, what we do with content and helping people out, is a lot of times people focus on themselves. How can I make myself look good? How can I live better? But truly building a great business is how can I bring value to the consumer, and how can I find that product market fit that gives the customer the value they're looking for, but also allows my business to flourish. But it still has to be consumer focused.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's what you've mentioned a lot of, whether it be through the education, whether it be through pricing your product to a point that the customer feels comfortable continuing to support you. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs are so focused on, like, I need a Lambo, I need this success, mm-hmm. I need the status. And that could be simply down to the content that they're putting out, to how they operate their business. It's got to be bringing value to the customer, and that's how your business will truly grow, and you build a real brand around it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty dry and cut type of entrepreneur. I really focus on, driving value, like you said, to the customer. Figuring out the right systems. Having that focus right now is huge. Doubling down on the areas that on your own team, especially right now, is very important. And that's the way I ultimately see people getting past what potentially may come here in the near future. So
This has been great to touch on all this stuff about what's happening right now and the way to think. But I also wanted to touch on kind of where you're thinking the future of cannabis is going to go, because I think we just saw this article come out about in Forbes with Burner, which it's awesome to see the industry getting into mainstream publications like that. But there was obviously a lot of focus on the challenges that the market's having. So how are you looking at the future? You obviously talked about predicting things, so I'd love to hear your view on where do you think the industry is going? What do you think the opportunities may be in the market, obviously without giving away any business secrets, but I'd love to hear how you view that.
Well, I mean, for us, it's always been waiting, not necessarily waiting, but projecting for federal legalization. I mean, the cannabis space, the economy of the market is not big enough here in California. I mean, the cannabis economy isn't big enough. I came across this article or posting today. 3/4 of California's local jurisdictions, city or counties, are still banning cannabis, right? So, we're still really forward thinking in the sense of there's still a tremendous amount of upside. We're just focusing on the accounts, storefronts, delivery services that are, really wanting to MSRP our products accordingly. Because, cannabis for so long was a product that people made, a great amount of money on because, at one point was no taxation. People were not, paying, employee taxes and general taxes at all. So, a lot of these things that we're focusing on right now is just having that forward thinking of the federal legalization aspect of things. Again, that's a long shot possibly, but we are looking at trying to get into another state or two before then, trying to get some, brand equity. I mean, shelf space is just our focus, obviously, with our portfolio of brands. And we've been able to really partner with some good accounts throughout California. Majority NorCal, we're based in Riverbank. So, our team is just, did a tremendous job on hitting the markets. In Northern California, we have, stores like Cookies, Nug, the Embarks, and these are the Premier Group stores. These are all stores that, we're doubling down on. We're not really going into the markets right now trying to prospect. We're just trying to go into the markets and pay attention to the people we have in front of us, and I think that's what's very important. That goes back to, looking at the economy and where it's at right now. Sometimes there is times that, you want to do certain things within the business aspect of growth, trying to get your business to grow. And then there's another aspect of, the sustainability, right? So you want to balance those two things. And for us right now, we're always prospecting, but more importantly, we're focusing in on the accounts that do good business with us, on the back end. And so ultimately, though, for the outlook, there's still a lot of work to be done, especially here in California. I mean, the taxes, cultivation tax recently got taken completely out. Excise tax dropped about 1% or 2%. So there's good momentum going. It's obviously it's challenging, but we just really need California cities and counties to open up to allow for a little bit of a healthier supply chain. And then obviously we need a lot of business owners to start taking a look at their business model as well. Cultivators had a challenging year over the last year or two. They had to make the pivots that they had to make. Manufacturers in 18, 19 had to really buckle down. A lot of them got wiped out. So right now it's just revisiting your business model, revisiting your streams of revenue, and figuring out, how to stay in the game until the federal legalization aspect of things. And hopefully at that point we can, be trucking things to Florida, Texas, New York, and so on and so forth. But, people are doing a great job right now of establishing themselves in those markets. And that's definitely a goal of ours as well, is getting in there federal legalization and trying to build that brand equity. But again, it's challenging to really align yourselves with. For me, and I know me and you've done some business together. I'm really a personable individual, right? I like to, if we're gonna do business, I wanna meet. Emails are great. I love emails. I love phone calls, text messages, but more importantly, everything's in person. So going and building these partnerships in these other states, we're looking at doing. We're in the talks with a few right now, but we're treading lightly. It's like I said, growth right now is a focus, but doubling down on what we're doing is more of a focus.
And I love that you talked about taking care of the accounts that are currently on board. And I think so many people are so focused on the next guy that they're not, or the next client, that they abandon so many of their other clients, and then next thing you know, they lose 5 clients. Like, how am I going to replace them?
Yeah.
And it's simply because you neglected them. And so I love that you mentioned that, because I do think in the challenging times, you've really got to give even more love to the clients that are on board and take care of them. And it's the same thing that, when I was at a conference a couple weeks ago with Gary Vee, he's like, so many of you guys are focused on getting your next follower that you abandon the 2 people that are following and commenting on your shit now.
That's a good one.
You don't ever comment, you don't message them, you don't acknowledge them. So then they fall off, and then you're like, I have nobody. And I think it's the same to be said with business, is that if you abandon the customers you have now, or you neglect them, or you treat them poorly, they're going to be gone, and then you're going to be pretty much out of business because you have no revenue coming in. So I love that you mentioned doubling down on supporting and working with those those clients that you're already working with, and that's very important. And growth is, I think in our earlier days, growth was a real big priority, where it was like everything. It was all about just grow or die. And that is a relevant thing to a certain extent, but growth within the relative time is more important. Like, you need to grow when you should be growing. You can't always be doubling or tripling. That's very unrealistic and very unsustainable, because you're going to at some point hit that deteriation of quality, and then you're going to make really big mistakes, and then you're going to burn your whole business out, or you burn your capital.
You need to downshift when you need to downshift, and that's just going back to the pivot points, and knowing and being aware of the environment that you're in, the landscape, and just hitting those key notes. And right now, you're 100% right. It's just dialing back and focusing on that. So
that's awesome, man. Well, I mean, we went through a lot, and it seems like it's been like an hour and a half, but I don't know, maybe it was because our conversation before was really good as well. But we touched on so many things. Obviously, your background. We shared a lot about what's happening with the world right now and how to think about it. Obviously, from the perspective of a marketing agency and a cannabis business, but still, a lot of these are relative things for any industry. This is practical business strategy in a challenging time, and this is not practical times. This is definitely quite the opposite, and I think this is where we really have to focus in on being great entrepreneurs and treating the people around us, our team, our clients, our partnerships, all with great care and really pouring into everybody. Because I think in challenging times, much like COVID, being in the food space at the time, people like Larry and Andy at Mango Crazy, and my buddy Eddie over at Giacomo's Coffee, and like all these different people started coming together. Even competitors of mine, we all started just messaging each other and like, hey bro, keep it going, man. Like, this is what I'm doing that's working. This is what you, and I think that built so much community. And some of those people, I was already good friends with some of them, but I became really good friends with some of those people that were my competitors before. And we built this community of people just there to support. If we found a good deal, if we found a good idea, we would share it with the next. And I think that's what's really important, is having a good network of people around you, whether you're in the same industry or not, just being close to other entrepreneurs and supporting, because in tough times, we all need a little extra help. We all need a little extra encouragement. And I think that every entrepreneur needs to come out and just network more, connect with more people, and just have more conversations, whether it be with your competitors, with your friends in the industry, people in other industries. It really is about supporting each other, because it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
And the greatest way to come through it is, having friends like yourself and being able to bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah. No, and that's That's great that you highlight that. Like, especially in cannabis right now, one thing that has obviously, like I mentioned, cultivators have taken such a hit. I mean, a lot of cultivators right now are selling their pounds for at cost, at cost. So
Which, if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
which is what?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Ballpark.
So costs to cultivate a product, let's say like outdoors between $200 to $300. A greenhouse could be between $350 to $450. Indoor can be around, if they're efficient, $700 to $850 a pound to cost of cultivation, or to cultivate the product to a pound. And a lot of people, as the industry goes along, people are going to understand how to scale and drive costs down. Yeah, a lot of people are breaking even, if not selling at a loss. There's a lot of flower on the market that is, 2 harvests ago. We had an inspection at our facility not too long ago, and we were speaking with the inspector that covers a lot of ground, and he's like, yeah, a lot of people are they're wasting their product out, so they didn't have to pay for cultivation tax, or because they were you get hit with cultivation tax at the time that you test the product. That's kind of when they call it, entering into the market. But a lot of people just held back from that and destroyed the product, so. But what we've realized in the last year is, and I have this conversation with cultivators, a lot. It's like, 2 years ago, or, I would say about 2 years ago, the wholesale market was a great market, moving pound bags, right? And since the decline in price per pound has dropped so low, the value has now flourished even more in the branded side, right? So this is where we're coming to the cultivators and saying, hey, look, at the end of the day, you're better off breaking that pound down to whether it's an eighth, half ounce, or an ounce, and taking that to market. Right. So a lot of cultivators were having a field day just wholesaling, products, 100 pounds here, 100 pounds there. And now it's kind of like, man, I don't know when the next wholesale buyer's going to come. And for me, in the last 3 years, I did maybe 2 transactions in wholesale. Right. So since I started the business, was focused on retail relationships. And now that's barely now coming to really show us how important that is, So it's flourished for us because a lot of distributors were wholesaling product, right? And that's an aspect of the business. It's just, again, in the time we're in the market, it's not the area that a lot of people want to play in. So when we're having these conversations with the cultivators, and having the supply chain contracts that we're looking at, it's like, hey, at the end of the day, we can, bring in the product, break it down. We go to market, put it on the shelf space. We're able to get a little bit more than your wholesale price point, because we're breaking it down, obviously, to an eighth or a half ounce. And we split profits, right? So, we go into, like you're saying, like a profit sharing situation. You go into different aspects of really trying to align yourself for everybody to try to win, that's, at the table in the position that they're in. So, strategic partnerships are a big reason why we're still here right now. It's not the checkbook, it's the money, it's the thinking, it's the alignment, it's the reaching out, it's the having the conversations, it's being true to, you're either going to make a move or you're going to die, and at the end of the day, for the ones that are making those moves, or the ones that are, they're relentless, to just wake up every day, they just, hey, okay, well, what can I do? Who can I realign myself with? Right. So, that's great that you bring that up, because that's literally like pretty much the conversation we're having right now. And for us, it's great because it allows us to attach our brand to a farm as well, right? Like, again, for me to either, go and buy a farm or put capital behind a farm, it just doesn't make much sense. I much rather go into a strategic partnership, whether that's a storefront, manufacturer, or a farm, because if anything, we're fully focused on our brands and driving revenue into our brands as much as possible. So this time right now, it's a very tricky time, but I think we've set our sights on some good partnerships, some good farms to really level up with and get past this time. I mean, it's not going to be a depressed market forever, right? And that's that forward thinking, always having that forward thinking to know that the market will pivot. There's ups and downs, so and even in the economy, so people just need to be positive as much as possible and have the conversation with their family members and be prepared, in the house and business and everything across the board.
I love that, what you just mentioned, because that's it in the challenging times. I think, especially if you're a male entrepreneur, and I mean, obviously I can't speak to as much about being a female entrepreneur because I'm not a female, but as a male, already communication is something that we lack, and willingness to be vulnerable, especially with the people that know, or we know that they need our support, like our family and things like that. But I think having those hard conversations is an important part. And sometimes I think as entrepreneurs, we just avoid them altogether. And we're like, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. But that's what leads to issues at your house. That's what leads to, you getting evicted, you getting foreclosed on because you just didn't have that conversation. And I think it is not to prepare for the worst, but let's be honest, like prepare for the worst, expect the, hope for the best. But you do need to have that, I don't want to say like fear mindset, but you need to be able to have that just in case. And if we're seeing things in the market, you've got to be willing to acknowledge it with your family, with your team. Yeah. Be willing to give them that reassurance, because if they're listening to the same shit that we're listening to, which is negativity from the media, and then they come into work and you're not acknowledging it, that can also lead to like, oh, is he just blind and naive?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I think it's important to acknowledge those things and have those conversations.
Recently, I was having that conversation with my wife, and she had a small boat business for a couple of years, because she was at home. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she was doing that, and I seen what the market kind of was going towards, right? And it's having that conversation at home too. And preparing and sometimes you have nice things, and anyways I had a Rolex that I had purchased, and we said, what, at the end of the day, let's reassess where we're at. Ended up selling the Rolex and got into the junk business. I bought a junk truck. I said, here, this is something that I want you to run. It helps us diversify, especially in the time that we may be going in. And that's when we ended up, getting into the junk business, but having that conversation at home, understanding that we needed to diversify and have that additional revenue stream for, whatever may happen. Again, it's just trying to predict and prepare. And we think that, we have great. Outlook on the business. I think there's a lot of opportunity to scale and so on and so forth, but it goes back to just having that conversation, which I think a lot of households need to start having that conversation now and say, hey, it's time to buckle up, and let's assess what we have, and the payments and all that good stuff, and especially you got kids in the house, you wanna do the right thing and have that thought process, because if not, then you're not, doing a good service to the future. So
I think too many entrepreneurs feel like they're on an island by themselves.
Yeah.
And really, conversation is what builds the bridges to those other people, whether it be conversations that we can have as friends going, hey, what are you doing? Like, this is what I'm dealing with. Having it with your wife, with your business partners, with your employees. Obviously, your employees, you can't have it as vulnerable of a conversation as you might have with your wife or your business partner, or even some of your friends. But I think it's really important as an entrepreneur to not feel like you're the only person dealing with this. The world is dealing with these issues, whether it be fear, whether it be emotion, and especially if you're a young entrepreneur, reaching out to people that have persevered 2008, whether they persevered and succeeded, they might have gotten through it and failed.
Good or bad, you want to hear it.
Just go talk to them. I talked to one of my buddies who crashed horribly in 2008, 2009, 2010. I was like, what mistakes did you make? And he's like, let me tell you, man.
Yeah.
I got a lot of them.
Yeah, because
sharing that gave me so much perspective on, okay, how should I be looking at this? And like you mentioned earlier, history repeats itself. And I think that is absolutely true. Obviously, it might look a little bit different, but a lot of the same mistakes, whether it be the way that people were thinking, the actions they're taking, the being over-levered and risk, these are all important things to factor in onto how you're going to approach it. And a lot of people don't want to take the time. They just get fearful. And it's like, I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were acknowledging somebody that had shared with them. I was looking at, I can't remember if it was 72, 74, when inflation was through the fucking roof and what the Fed did in that period. And this was like 8-9 months ago, this guy was looking at it because he's like, it's going to happen again. And everybody's like, oh, you're crazy. And he's like, no, history repeats itself. And so much of what was happening then is happening now. And he was prepared for that, And I think that if you are able to do your history or your research on the history of times like this, while everything's going to be a little bit different, a lot of the habits, a lot of the especially retail habits, we're very same. We're taking stupid bets. We're taking, we're buying homes that were just, ridiculous loans. Well, think about all the what's happened in the stock market. Think about what's happening in credit. People were over levered to the freaking moon, whether it be credit cards or getting margins from Robinhood. And there's people that I know that started buying stocks in early 2021, and they're getting like 10x levers on their money. And it's like, what are you doing getting a 10x margin? That's fucking stupid. Yeah. You're putting yourself in a horrible position. Stocks only go up. No, you only know one time, which is good.
Well, one thing recently, at least over the last year or two, which has been like kind of a emotional roller coaster for me, was crypto. Crypto was emotional not because I was in it, because I wasn't in it. Yeah. Meaning like, and I held myself back over a dozen times, because for me it was like, look, you hear a lot of people that went through 2008. They're like, when the hairdressers started talking about they own 3-4 houses, it was like a little mind-boggling, right? And not to any individual, but when you got, general people talking about crypto, it's scary, right? Because even though to me crypto has, and this can be conversation, but crypto has very little fundamentals behind it. It's like I see this huge push for people that that just very have little. But this is on the flip side of that too. Is I always would say try it, right? Because it's always good for people to have that experience, win or lose, right? So, but for me, seeing that a lot of individuals around me who were getting into it, and I was holding back, like so many conversations. Nope, I'm not. Nope, I'm not gonna do it. I can't. I'm not interested in it. I don't want to do it. And that was a roller coaster for me, because there was so many times where like, all right, let's just put a little bit in it, and luckily right now I'm glad I didn't, because a lot of it is obviously where it's at, but that was interesting, roller coaster for sure, but like there's a time to there's a time and a place for the conversation. There's a time and a place to engage your money, even like a year, maybe it's about 9 months, I pulled out of the TD, I pulled out of the stock market. Was having an interesting time, playing with TZA, which is, shorting the market. And I was like, man, this is not going to be good. Yeah. I'm just like, I didn't close my account, but I'm like, all right, everything's out. I'll re-engage at a different time, but it was, again, assessing that and just having that thought process. And that was having thought processes with other individuals, right? And just, and saying, you know what, I'm making this decision. And especially the stock market, it's a tough
Nothing
one.
Makes sense in the stock market right now. It's funny that, you made a quote earlier about Warren Buffett, and like, I'm about to use another one, which is that, and this has been, I think, the biggest thing I've learned over the last probably 12 months, is that the wealthiest people don't look at where can I make the most money. They look at where can I make money without losing it. Like they want to minimize that downside. But so many people, going back to the crypto thing, is like so many people, they're like, oh, crypto's the best. And I'm like, if it wasn't worth what it was and you didn't make the money you did, you wouldn't be in that shit. You wouldn't be in it for the fundamentals of the product. If you truly believed in Bitcoin, you would have been buying it a long time ago, but you got into it because there was a boom and you had a great opportunity to make money. You don't actually believe in the long-term intrinsic value of the
understand
technology.
It,
yeah,
and you just got to be aware of that. Look, if you don't understand it, maybe just don't play with it. Or create a fake account. You know, and do that for 6 months, 8 months. A lot of people, it's like a fix. They just want to get a fix, and I always just say, look, at the end of the day, there's other ways to get the fix.
Most people are playing the lottery when it comes to investing. And I would have people message me. They'd be like, "Oh, what's the best stock? What's the best crypto I can make the most money on?" I'm like, "The one you believe in," because you are unwilling. Because if you buy today and it drops tomorrow, you're gone. You're out of it because you didn't actually believe in it. You were emotionally jumped in because you bought my opinion, which wasn't really your opinion. You got to be sold out. And I think that's the same thing that can be said in entrepreneurship. There's a lot of people, especially in more independent, like 1099 type businesses, like real estate, mortgage, even solar. People get into things because they're like, "Oh, this guy over here made 100K last month, so I'm going to get in." But you got in because of what somebody else did, not because you actually believed in, like, wow, this is a place that I can not only make wealth, but I believe in the product. I believe in the long-term value of it. And I think it's the same thing when people look at cannabis. They think back to
thinking.
Yeah, they think back to how it used to be. And that's why I asked you about the pound prices, because I'm just laughing, because many moons ago, when I may or may not have sold cannabis illegally, I remember paying $4,500 for a pound of indoor. Now, this was 16 years ago, but it'll give you, you think with time, things should get more efficient and, maybe more margin. It is slashed when you're talking about indoor being $800 to $1,200. That is, do the math. Drug dealers are not, or cannabis dispensaries are not drug dealers of the past.
No, well.
Even drug dealers currently are drug dealers of the past.
Basing off that is interesting what you're saying, because there was, a whole wave of individuals, obviously, and more power to any individual that can accomplish this, but going from the black market to the legal market, right? And I've seen a lot of individuals who made a tremendous amount of money in that market, in that black market, props, they just killed it. But when they were running their numbers and projections, they left out, I think, a few things, left out some structures, left out some things that when they did make that transition, it hit them hard, and they just were not prepared for that, and a lot of them were able to say, hey, all right, I didn't think of that, or I didn't see that coming, and so on and so forth, and they made that pivot, and they're still here today. But there was, and there still is a handful of them, that when you're selling in the black market for a period of time, I'm not saying it's easy money, but it's you don't get comfortable. You're still paranoid, but you do get into this rhythm of you know what? Okay, let's keep this thing going, right? But when you're in business, the market's changed, right? When you're in the legal industry, because the consumer patterns change. And that is where a lot of people, I think, today are hurting so much, because for the last 10, some people 15, 20 years were selling in the black market. They didn't have to challenge themselves that much. I'm not saying it was easy or anything by any means, but it's different than business right now in this nature right now. So. But a lot of them are making those pivot points, and again, more power to the individuals who are to make that transition, because that's extremely challenging.
100%. Not paying taxes to paying taxes is a whole different ball game. So, well, man, I appreciate your time today. I'd love to get you back on. We could probably go for 5 more hours, but one, first and foremost, thank you. Second, I always like to be able to allow our audience to be able to find you. So how can they find out about you and the brands that you operate? So whether it be Instagrams, websites, just give them some links to be able to find you guys.
Shoot, my Instagram handles J_Farhoud. And
we'll drop this in the show notes as well.
Our high power product is high powered period syrup. That's our 1,000 milligram syrup tincture. And then we have Lumen Cannabis. And then we also have our junk removal, which is Dump It.
Shameless plug right here. We got high power. Make sure you guys check this out.
Yeah, and big shout out to the Level Up group. You guys have been crushing it. I mean, I think you guys are managing all of our businesses, and we're very happy with the team that you guys have put together here. You guys
love
are
working with you guys.
crushing it, and we want to keep things rolling over there. You guys are crushing it.
I love it, man. No, it's we're just amplifying what you guys created, so that's the fun part about it. So. Well, perfect. With that, guys, I know you guys got something from this, so please screenshot this, share this to your Instagram. Make sure you also check out our YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you check out our podcast on Spotify. Please, if you can, just take 2 seconds. This is all I ask. I don't sell anything on this podcast. If you can rate and review our podcast, I'd greatly appreciate it. And with that, we'll see you guys back here for the next episode. Make sure you check out Julian and all the brands he's working with. We're dropping them in the show notes. But we'll see you guys back here for episode number 62.